Man, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of EOS. It's 1090 Jake, man. I'm rocking with y'all like y'all rocking with me. For this video, I'm doing another review on the Netflix documentary, Murder to Mercy, the Cyntoia Brown story.
Yeah, it's over with now. I got life.
I do pray that you show me mercy and that you give me a second chance.
I first heard about Cyntoia Brown through social media, seeing her on Instagram. Celebrities were pushing her name. A lot of people were pushing for a petition to get her freed.
Now celebrities like Rihanna, T.I., and Lana Del Rey are tweeting for clemency for Cyntoia.
I want to go home and I can't.
And I feel that social media really blew up her case. I wasn't aware of her case until I saw it.
Cyntoia Brown shot Johnny Allen.
I shot him because I thought he was gonna shoot me.
This young woman didn't get a fair shake.
She was a 16-year-old runaway, beaten, pimped, and raped.
Watching her documentary, it was very emotional. It's an emotional roller coaster. And throughout the documentary, the closer I got to the end, I felt more relief. Because in the beginning, I felt a fire inside of my chest. I felt so much sympathy for this young girl, hearing her story. The only thing that got me through the documentary was the fact that I know she has already been released. Because the first hour into it, I was just pissed. I felt that listening to the people speak on her case and speak against her, I was just so angry. And like I said, the whole documentary is an emotional roller coaster. It's going to push your buttons in different ways. Cyntoia Brown was a 16-year-old girl who at the time was living with a pimp in a motel. He told her that she was lazy, that all she was doing was smoking, getting high, and having sex with him, who at the time was 24. So he told her to go get some money. She went to an area in Nashville, not seeking out anyone in particular, but just because she knew it was an area where there were customers and she could prostitute. She was picked up by a guy who was 43 years old. They went back to her house. He's showing her guns. He's telling her how influential of a person he is in the community. How he was in the military, he was a sharpshooter. He showed her 2 shotguns and a big chrome gun, which I'm assuming was a handgun. And what she states is that she wanted to go to sleep in the hopes that he would fall asleep so she could sneak out because she was becoming uncomfortable in his presence because of the type of things he was saying. There was things about his demeanor where she was seeing a lot of the same actions and getting the same type of energy and vibe as she did through her pimp, the man named Cutthroat. That gave her a nervous feeling, and she asked if they could go downstairs to watch TV. Why? Because downstairs was closer to the door in case she needed to escape. And when she brought up sleeping, she was led back upstairs. While they were laying on the bed, he tried to grab her in a sexual way multiple times. And I believe it was the 5th time she jerked her body, made an angry noise, and he gave her a cold stare. You know, a 43-year-old man, after presenting firearms, talking about how good of a shooter he is, you know his intentions. She knew what he wanted. She knows nobody else knows where she is. She now sees the danger in the situation that she's in. And I can sympathize with the fact that when you're 16, you know, I myself put myself in a lot of dangerous situations. I understood the risk. And that's why I enjoyed it. Because never did I not come out on top. That was the thrill, the adrenaline of doing illegal crimes, especially when there was a reward, such as money. Or even doing drugs when you know the risk of you could overdose, you could die, but you don't. And through not dying or through not finding the repercussions of what you're doing, it gives you that false sense of immunity. It gives you the false sense of, I can't be hurt. I can't die. I can keep doing this. But in that moment, she had that feeling of nervousness and fear. And she tried to fall asleep or fake being asleep in his bed as he laid there. And when he gave her that stare, he turned. And she said that he turned to grab something, which she assumed was going to be a gun. And with everything rushing through her head, the fear of everything that he's presented to her, the fact that there were guns all around them, she grabbed the gun and she fired. That bullet struck him in the back of the head and exited his face. He was killed. He immediately died. She grabbed his wallet, she grabbed his truck, and she fled. At 16, she was arrested for the crime. And you watch the progression of the courts. You get to understand her bit by bit as the documentary goes on through the psychological exams and just hearing her speak, hearing how much of a negative space that she was in at this time, that everything that she's experienced in her life so far has been pain, has been suffering. But you also, if you close your eyes and listen to the documentary, you don't hear a 16-year-old. When I close my eyes and listen to her speak at that young age, when she first was arrested and going through these psychological exams, she sounded like somebody that would be in their 20s, especially with the things, the trauma and life experiences that she had already gone through. And that right there is what started to piss me off about this documentary. Because when she was in court, the DA, the state, they were not sympathetic. And I understand they have a job and their job is to prove guilt. And her lawyers, a public defender, their job is to prove innocence. And I'm just thinking to myself, how can these people not see a 16-year-old child? Everything that she says sounds grown. Everything that she's been through, a child should never go through. But I was thinking to myself, this is probably why so many children are sentenced at a young age, and so many people that work inside of the courts are so unsympathetic. Because they're not as attached. They're detached. They just look at the case. They don't look at the person. They don't sympathize enough with the person to look at a 16-year-old and understand their mental state, their history of abuse that she's gone through, her family. This documentary breaks down her mother, her grandmother, how they've all been raped, the sexual abuse, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, all of these different factors. But at the end of the day, the judge found it was best that her case goes from juvenile court to adult court. If it stayed in juvenile court from the ages of 16 till I believe it was 19 in Tennessee, I think that's what the documentary said, she would have been under the control of the juvenile justice department. And she would have got therapy. She would have got the care that she needed, but instead she was put into adult court to be sentenced as an adult, where the only two outcomes is 51 years or a life sentence based on her charges. The documentary digs deeper into her life, her family's life, how mental illness is a huge issue within her family. You see that she never really had a chance from the beginning. It was just set in stone that life was not going to be easy for her. And the documentary, it builds all of these emotions and questions and thoughts inside of your mind, because going into it, you already know she's been sentenced to life. You already know that she gets out. But having to watch how it progressed and turned into what it did, I was just so angry. Seeing the state, the DA, wanting to get this 16-year-old girl punished, saying that in no way was she in fear for her life. This wasn't a self-defense case. She shot the man in the back of the head, and she should be punished as an adult. We're not going to consider any of the mental history. We're just going to send her away for life. To me, it's just like so many people's lives are thrown away because of that mentality. We should just throw them away. We should just get rid of them. We shouldn't worry about reform. We shouldn't take into consideration her age, what age a brain is fully developed. None of that matters. Just throw her away. It makes me think of, at what generation did these people come up with these laws? Because these are not new laws that this should happen, this outcome. You know what I mean? Just like when you break down the Florida laws, the drug laws, a lot of that was based on the 80s. A lot of that was based on the kingpins and all the violence that was going down in South Florida due to drugs. An issue that isn't even as prevalent as it was back then, but the punishments have remained the same. I asked myself, is it fair to have people in positions of power when the time period that they studied law and the generation they grew up in is not relevant to today? The punishments are not the same. Society is not the same. And the youth is not the same. So is a 60 or a 50-year-old judge actually able to relate to a 16-year-old girl and seek justice in her case for her, for the victim, whichever it is? Or are people so out of date that they're just going off of what they know from the past and they don't want to understand the girl? They want to have a wall up. They don't want to be as attached to the case. They just want to read it in black and white. She deserves it. She gets it. Cyntoia ended up being sentenced to life in prison. When she was sentenced to life, you see every single court procedure. You see the tears, you see the family, how they were reacting. You see how her support system was reacting, the lawyers, the psychologists, the people that had her back. And while she was incarcerated, she took reform into her own hands. And I can do nothing but salute and respect that, because reform does not exist in the Department of Corrections. That's not what they do in there. But for somebody to take reform into their own hands and be a leading role model for reform, it's amazing. While she was in prison, she was able to get 2 college degrees. She had a flawless reputation in prison. She wasn't getting into the drugs. She wasn't getting into the violence. She continued fighting her case. She had a support system that continued fighting for her. And eventually she was able to ask for clemency. And her case was reduced from a life sentence to 15 years by the governor. And even when she went in front of the parole board, not everybody was in agreement. One of them said her time should be reduced to 25. Another one said nothing should change with her sentence. She got what she should have got. But in the end, the governor decided she should be freed, have the sentence reduced to 15 years, which meant that she was getting out in a few months, and she would have 10 years probation after the fact. What the documentary didn't show was she actually met her husband inside of prison. He saw her on TV. I actually watched this on The Breakfast Club with Charlamagne the God and everybody else, DJ Envy. And they brought her and her husband on, and he spoke on how God put him in her direction, how they started exchanging letters, they met, and he just believed in her so much, he stayed by her side, and they are now together. I really recommend that y'all go and watch that interview on The Breakfast Club. It's a beautiful story. But seeing her now on the other side of the fence, getting to understand this case and how the main factor in this case was a law was changed. That is what was pissing me off the whole time watching this documentary, as I was questioning these laws. Because when she was arrested at that time, she was considered a prostitute in the courts. But because of a new law passing, she was considered a victim to sexual predators. That new law changed everything, and it makes me think, how many laws need to be revisited, need to be gone over and changed. How many people inside of prison are focused on reforming themselves, but they don't have that outside voice. They don't have that celebrity status to put their case out there. It makes me think, how can we change the prison system, the court system, justice, so that it is truly what it is supposed to be? I highly recommend everybody watches this documentary. You better have your tissue ready because it is very emotional from the beginning to the end. But it is a beautiful story, and it is great to see that she has overcome her situation. That she didn't understand her punishment, she overstood her punishment. She was able to stand with her chin up, excel while she was in hell, prison. And now she's on the other side and able to live life. And I hope that some of these prison channels are able to be a voice for inmates that don't have a voice. You know, that was one of the main reasons I started this channel, was to be a voice for those who can no longer be heard because they're behind these bars, these walls, and these fences. It's 1090J. I'm rocking with y'all, y'all rocking with me. Till next time.